War in the Pacific. We all know about the epic battles the United States fought against the Japanese in the Pacific, but British, Indian, Australian and New Zealand troops were also fighting the Japanese. Sunday, 7th of December 1941, Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The US Pacific Fleet is decimated, but luckily the aircraft carriers are at sea on exercise. On the same day, the Japanese attacked the British in Malaya. The Japanese had the advantage of surprise and benefited from air and naval supremacy. They landed with 200 light tanks. The British had only 23 obsolete tanks. The Japanese had 600 aircraft. The British 158 mainly outdated aircraft. Also, on the 8th of December 1941, Japanese attack Hong Kong. Although badly outnumbered, the Hong Kong garrison, which included British, Indian and Canadian troops, mounted a fierce defence and held out for 17 days. 8th of December 1941. The USA, Britain, Australia and New Zealand declare war on Japan. 10th of December 1941. British battleships HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse are sunk by Japanese aircraft. They have no air support. 11th of December 1941. Germany declares war on the USA. 22nd of December 1941. Japan attacks the Philippines. Japanese troops land in 3 places in the Philippines. American and Philippine troops, fighting every step of the way, retreat to the Bataan Peninsula. 17th of March 1941. General MacArthur is ordered to leave the Philippines. January 1942. Japanese land in New Guinea. They are met with strong resistance by the outnumbered 39th Australian Infantry Battalion. 15th of February 1942. Singapore falls. Under-resourced for years and with almost no defences on the mainland, there is no way back. February and March 1942. Japanese launch air attacks on Darwin. 242 Japanese aircraft attacked the harbour, airfield and oil storage facilities, destroying 30 aircraft and sinking 11 vessels. 4th to 8th of May 1942, Battle of the Coral Sea. US carrier Yorktown is badly damaged and sinks. Japanese invasion forces are turned back by US and Australian forces. 31st of May 1942. 3 Japanese midget submarines are sunk in Sydney Harbour. 3rd to 6th of June 1942. The Battle of Midway, a major US victory. Japan lost 1 heavy cruiser and 4 aircraft carriers, which included 300 aircraft and over 200 experienced pilots. The US lost 1 destroyer, 1 aircraft carrier, the USS Yorktown, and 145 planes. 7th of August 1942. US attacks Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. It is their first land offensive against the Japanese. At first, taken by surprise, the Japanese land 15,000 additional troops, bringing their strength up to 20,000. 3 major land battles took place around the Henderson airfield. Unable to break through the American defences, the Japanese evacuate their remaining forces. 25th of August 1942. Australians capture Milne Bay. Australian troops with American engineers land at Milne Bay to build an airfield. A large Japanese amphibious force lands, but the Australians block their advance. The Australians press forward against the Japanese positions, driving the enemy back into the sea. 24th of September 1942. The Australians begin the Owen Stanley offensive. They cross New Guinea on the Kokoda Trail, a hell on earth. They cross the Owen Stanley mountain range in the most atrocious conditions. Endless rain, mud, humidity, heat, tropical disease, impossible terrain, carrying every single piece of equipment, ammunition, food, and carrying the wounded back. The Australians proved it was them and not the Japanese who were the best jungle fighters. November 1942. New Zealand troops take over from US troops to fight the Japanese in New Caledonia and the Solomon Islands. 22nd of January 1943. Australian and US forces defeat Japan in Papua New Guinea. 22nd of October 1943. The 3rd New Zealand Division lands in the Treasury Islands. It was the first amphibious assault launched by New Zealand troops since Gallipoli. 1st of November 1943, the US invades Bougainville. The Japanese attacked the perimeter again and again, but were pushed back by US Marines. December 1943, US troops invade New Britain. The capital, Rabaul, was defended by a garrison of around 98,000 Japanese troops and hundreds of artillery and anti-aircraft guns. They would be contained by Australian forces until the end of the war. January 1944. 53,000 US assault troops invade the Marshall Islands. Formerly a German protectorate, the Marshall Islands were conceded to Japan following World War I. A threat to the shipping routes, US air raids destroyed every single Japanese airplane on the Marshall Islands. 5th of February 1944. Chindits, long-range penetration groups, penetrate deep into Burma, attacking enemy communication and supply lines. 4th of May 1944. Japanese attack India from Burma. At Imphal, the Japanese advance was halted by British, Indian and Gurkha troops. 15th of June 1944. New Zealand Divisional Headquarters returns to New Caledonia. 15th of June 1944. US troops land on Saipan. The capture of Saipan would give the Allies a base from which the Japanese homeland could be bombed by long-range B-29 Superfortress bombers. American troops fight their way inland against fanatical Japanese resistance. Many Japanese citizens and troops commit suicide rather than be taken prisoner. 19th of June 1944. The Battle of the Philippine Sea. Known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the Battle of the Philippine Sea was a Japanese defeat. It was a decisive battle from which Japan would never recover. Japan would lose 3 aircraft carriers, 300 aircraft, and the ability to fight further large-scale carrier actions. 3rd of July 1944. The Japanese retreat from India. Reduced to a starving rabble, they abandon their artillery and flee. In July 1944, the Americans were withdrawn from Bougainville for rest and refit, and were replaced by the Australian Second Corps, who fought the Japanese until war's end. 21st of July 1944, US troops land in Guam. Guam was garrisoned by 19,000 Japanese combat troops, dug into strong defensive positions. Despite serious losses, the 3rd Marine Division consolidates its beachheads and advanced inland. Although there was continuous Japanese resistance, Guam was turned into a major logistical base to support the invasion of the Philippines. 20th of October 1944, the Philippine campaign begins. As promised, General MacArthur returns to the Philippines. Japanese forces in the Philippines would continue to resist until ordered to surrender following the atomic bomb being dropped on Japan. 23rd of October 1944. Battle of Leyte Gulf. In response to the Allies landing in the Philippines, the Japanese Navy launched a massive attack on the US Navy. It was the biggest naval battle in World War II and a decisive US victory. The Japanese lost 4 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 8 cruisers and 12 destroyers. The battle severed the Japanese supply lines, cutting them off from the rich resources of the countries they'd occupied in Southeast Asia. October 1944, the Australian 5th Division took over from US troops to continue to fight the Japanese on New Britain. Australians were ordered to carry out a containment operation. Japanese strength was estimated to be 38,000 men. In fact, it was 69,000. November 1944. The British Pacific Fleet, which includes Australian, New Zealand and Canadian ships, fight alongside the US fleet. The British Pacific Fleet includes 6 fleet carriers, 4 light carriers, 8 escort carriers, with 750 aircraft, 5 battleships, 11 cruisers, 41 destroyers, 18 sloops, 13 frigates, 36 submarines, and 54 supporting fleet-trained vessels. 9th of February 1945, US troops land on the Japanese island of Iwo Jima. The battle saw fierce fighting with high casualties on both sides. 21st of March 1945. British forces take Mandalay, Burma. At Mandalay, the Japanese held on for several days before falling back behind the moat and walls of Fort Dufferin. As plans were made to attack the fort through the sewers, the Japanese unexpectedly surrendered. Most of the Japanese forces and heavy equipment in Burma were destroyed during this battle. 3rd of May 1945. British forces take Rangoon, Burma. It was a race to capture Rangoon before the monsoons broke and made the roads impassable. The Japanese breakout from Rangoon cost them 10,000 men. 1st of June 1945. US troops, supported by the British Pacific Fleet, land on Okinawa. The British carriers had armoured flight decks, and although attacked and hit by kamikaze aircraft, they remained in action. The fighting was bitter. On one hill alone, the Japanese had 500 entrances to their underground positions. Based on the experience at Okinawa, it was estimated that the US would suffer up to 1 million casualties invading the Japanese mainland. 10th of June 1945, Australian troops land in Borneo. The landings were only lightly opposed, but retreating Japanese set 37 oil wells ablaze. Private Tom Starchvich was later awarded the Victoria Cross for attacking 2 machine gun positions single-handedly. He would do the same again later on the same day. 6th of August 1945, an atomic bomb falls on Hiroshima. 9th of August 1945, an atomic bomb falls on Nagasaki. 15th of August 1945, Japan surrenders. The war in the Pacific comes to an end.